Okay, good evening everyone. This is another Chromatone video, and today's topic is going to be Keeler-Soriano principles of Janko / chromatic fingering. Now, I'm saying Keeler-Soriano, I'm Soriano, but 110 years before me, a gentleman by the name of Keeler wrote a pamphlet to help people get started on playing the Janko. And about 2 or 3 months ago, I wrote Paul Vandervoort, and I asked him if he knew of any tips or principles of fingering a Janko or a uniform keyboard. And he very kindly sent me a PDF scan he had of a pamphlet that was written in the 1890s by this gentleman named Keeler, which he didn't think was a big deal, but I received those via email, and I was very excited because in about 5 pages, this gentleman Keeler gave some very good starting points for how to get started fingering Janko as comfortably, if not more comfortably, as how one would play a diatonic piano. And I've taken those principles, I've added my own principles that I've discovered over the last few months of playing this instrument that are both more directly relevant for the chromatone and also just things I've picked up from my experience the last few months. So they're a mixture of mine and Keeler's. So I've boiled down to 7 principles. I might discover more principles with time, and I'm going to try and explain them one by one pretty briefly though. Okay, the first principle is the middle fingers 2, 3, and 4 must not play on the same row as the thumb. Okay, so if you're going to play something like just a simple pentatonic, you want those 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers to be at least 1 row below wherever your thumb is. Okay, and that's for the obvious reason that your thumb is shorter than your other 4 fingers. Okay. Now, these are principles. I chose not to use the word rules because for every rule you can come up with, there's a situation in which to break that rule. For example, Paul Vandervoort chooses to play his octaves like this. He plays the thumb on the root, and then with his pinky he plays an octave 2 rows up. And if he needs to throw a 5th in there, I imagine he puts it up here or perhaps here. And he's right in doing that. That's very ergonomic, and because having to play an octave with the thumb and the pinky on 1 row might seem fine for the middle of the keyboard, but once you start getting around here and around here, you find that you're twisting your arm a bit uncomfortably, which is not ergonomic. With that said, I choose to play my octaves all in the same row. For example, if I'm playing an octave in my left hand and I'm playing a rootless voicing in my right hand, I find that very comfortable. I like it. I just like being able to scan my lower 2 rows, which is where I keep my diatonic notes, and seeing that there's an octave right there. I did experiment for about a week with playing the octave that way, with octave here and the lower note down up 3 rows. I didn't find that I hit those notes very quickly intuitively, so I've gone back to doing it that way. Okay, so these are principles. Okay, second principle is fingerings for any chord, scale, or melody should not exceed 4 rows. Right? So for example, in my last video, I used as an example the C minor blues scale. So that started off here. As a matter of fact, of the different scales that I've developed for myself, that's the only one that I'm actually taking in 4 rows. I have since been striving to use no more than 3 rows. I find that 3 rows is ideal. But you definitely don't want to go more than 4 rows, because if you're using a 5-row instrument such as this, if you're going to transpose, you've only got 4 rows to work with. You know, I don't use this top row thing here on the chromatone. It might as well not even be there for me. So once you go up here, you've got space to work. All right, so you don't want to use more than 4 rows, but in my book, 3 rows is actually ideal. And I'm actually, when we get to, I think, the 7th principle, I'm going to give you another reason why I think 3 rows is ideal. Okay, third principle is really just an extrapolation of the second principle, which is never play everything on one row, right? Even if you're playing something like the whole note scale, you wouldn't want to play it all on one row. You might damage your wrist trying to do that narrowly. Okay. Principle number 4: the second finger never plays on the same row below the 5th finger. In other words, you don't want your pointer finger to be below your pinky. You want your pointer finger to either be on the same row or above the pinky. Okay. 5th principle is when faced with the choice of playing something on the extreme upper part of the keyboard or the extreme lower, choose the lower. Actually, that's totally a Keeler principle. He has his reasons for that. I think his thinking is we really should be playing down here, first 3 rows, and the upper rows are really for transposition. That's what Keeler is going for there. 6th principle is this: the thumb never plays above the other fingers. You wouldn't play a scale where you start here and then work across. That's the exact opposite of what you want to be doing. You want your thumb to be below. Okay. The 7th and last principle that I'm going to talk about today is very important. It's something I've picked up from experience these last few months playing the Chromatone, which is two-hand playing is easier to the extent that the fingering in both hands is similar. Now let me explain what I mean by that. When I first started digging into the Chromatone, and I was very excited about learning to play Afro-Cuban montunos, which is very much the center of my style since I'm first and foremost an aspiring salsa musician, I said, okay, I'm going to play a very basic 1-4-5 montuno in the most ergonomic way possible. So that montuno that I know is basically an arpeggiation of a C chord, an F chord, and a G chord. So I said, okay, the most ergonomic way to play a C chord is going to be with my thumb down here, E here, since the pointer finger is a little longer, and with my middle finger I'm going to hit G way up here. So that's the most, this is what I was thinking. I'm not saying do this, but this is what I was originally thinking. This is the most ergonomic way to play this arpeggiation. So I'm going to play C arpeggiated, and then I'm just going to repeat that same pattern, but starting from F. F arpeggiated, G arpeggiated. So I said, this is how I'm going to play this montuno. I'm going to play, which looks good on paper, but we run into a few problems by doing that. The first is, as you can see, I'm already using up 5 rows. I'm using up 4 rows here, and then I'm using another 4 rows here. So I've actually already used the breadth or the height of the Chromatone. So if I want to take that same exact riff and start it from D flat, I'm running out of room. I've got to use those quirky looking keys up there. So first problem with it is I'm using up too many rows. That's not even the worst problem. The worst problem is if I apply the same logic to my left hand, I'm going to want to do the exact opposite because of the curvature of the left hand. We have tall fingers here, shorter finger here, and very short finger here. So the logical thing to do would be to start the root here, then play the 3rd here, and then the 5th here. So I'm going to start C, and then go down to F and play the same exact shape. G. So on the left hand, I would have to play the montuno. Now, the problem arises is when you try to play that riff in 2 hands at the same time. You're starting off in different places. Now, here's what we've discovered. We can train ourselves to do anything. We're intelligent people, and with enough practice, anything can be learned. But what we find in the crucible of experience is you want the hands to be doing as much a similar process as possible, especially when it comes to going up and down on the Chromatone. For some reason, to tell the brain, start here, go up in the right hand, or go up with the right hand and go and make a downward shape with the left hand. Go here, go up here with the right hand and down here with the left hand. you're making this more difficult than you need to be. So although it can be done, and if you really want to do it that way, if ergonomics is your utmost consideration, go for it. If you want to increase the speed with which you learn, you want your left and right hand to be doing almost the same thing. So how do we do that? First of all, if we limit ourselves to 3 rows, instead of playing a C major like this, we play it like this. Now, if we look at that shape, which is how I play my major chords always these days, if it's a triad, I find that that same shape, limited to 3 rows, is pretty comfortable in the left hand, right? So if I'm playing a montuno that consists of 3 major chords, one after the other, why not just play that same exact shape in both the left hand and the right hand? Play it like this. So that's the last principle. 2-hand playing, especially if you're playing the same thing in both hands, octaves. 2-hand playing is easier to the extent that the fingering in both hands is similar, if not exactly the same. So those are 7 principles to get you going with Janko and Chromatone playing. I hope this has been helpful. God bless. Take care.